All right, friends, we're back at it, and today we will be talking about facility management. Facility management is defined as the process by which the actual physical workplace where the sport event or recreation event takes place. And sport managers are charged with coordinating and managing the increasingly complex nature of the physical workplace. And although traditionally facility management was based on just the physical maintenance of the facility in dealing with things traditionally like the business management or the grounds, it's become increasingly more complicated. And now facility managers are charged with really integrating the people, uh, the places, and the processes. So if you think back to what we were talking about during management, facility managers need to integrate and sort of optimize their different resources, their human capital, their physical capital, and their technological capital. And this takes shape in looking at different issues and decisions related to the day-to-day management of the facility, how it's been organized and designed architecturally from an engineering perspective, and then other issues that come up within the facility, whether it's relations, human resources, or sort of operational aspects. So this has become an increasingly more complicated area for sport managers. Um, the primary function of sport facility managers is sort of that planning, organizing, or the planning, organizing, execution, and an evaluation standpoint. And so they need to be able to understand the work environment that they find themselves in, and then actively work to support the goals and objectives of the organization. A little bit of history is usually helpful for this. The textbook breaks up the history of stadiums or stadia and facility financing in three phases. From the 1880s to about the end of the Great Depression, we had our first wave of stadia construction. And this is where you get those iconic sort of ballparks like Wrigley Field or Fenway Park or what was known as Briggs Field at the time, Tiger Stadium, or where the New York Yankees originally played. And within this first era of financing, 100% of these stadia were paid through private financing. Government was not involved. And to that point, the the architecture of these stadiums was usually pretty grandiose. It was very much supposed to be a tribute to the sport of baseball and all of its sort of ultralistic aspects. Oftentimes, these sports stadia were downtown, where the majority of the population lives, because uh, at that time in the United States, people were not living in suburbs. Suburbs really didn't exist. You had the city and then the country. And if you didn't live in the city, it would take quite a bit of coordinating to actually get down to watch a game. So usually people who were living in the city would be the ones going to see the game, and also sometimes these stadia were haphazardly constructed and kind of funkily designed to fit within the random nooks and crannies of that downtown city because that's where they could fit. If we move to phase two, then now we see a little bit of movement because in the first half we see um, that 100% of the stadia were private funding or private financing. But then once we hit a threshold in 1923, the Los Angeles Coliseum actually becomes the first facility to be financed with public money. And then this starts a bit of a trend where overall, during this first era, about 31% of construction of facilities included public money. Um, We move to phase two, and in phase two, we see the evolution of sport facilities where initially stadias would be created for one tenant or one team, and then from the 60s to 1979, we see a focus more on larger multi-use facilities that were supposed to be all-purpose and could support multiple tenants, multiple teams. We see almost 60 sport and entertainment facilities built during this time, and we see an increase in the amount of cities beginning to allocate public funding for these projects. Um, Also, many of these stadiums are seem to be designed in a similar way, and they become to be known as cookie cutter stadiums or donut stadiums because they're big in an oval. So we see several examples here: Veterans Stadium, Three Rivers Stadium out of Pittsburgh, and Riverfront Stadium, which I believe is in Cincinnati, but do not quote me because I don't exactly know 100%. We also see the beginning of more franchises relocating, and then we also see some. This is the era where leagues begin expansion, team expansion. So we see the NHL expanding, we see Major League Baseball expanding, we see the National Football League expanding, etc. Phase three is even more accelerated. During this time period from 1987 to the present, where we're at right now, 90 new facilities were created. And again, we see a familiar refrain here where many of the facilities, the majority, are going to be have some sort of public financing. And we see a move away from multi-use facilities, and we see going back to one team being able to be the sole tenant or user of the stadium. So we also see a return to stadiums that are designed to look like the classic stadiums of the past. We see Camden Yards, for example, is designed in that manner. Um, and the although the cost, the percentage of the stadium that the public finances might shrink during this time period. For example, let's say instead of the public financing 50% of the cost, it's 20% of the cost. But because the overall cost of stadia have increased during this time, the public actually is on the hook for more money. And we see favorable leases also being created for teams that get sweetheart deals in these publicly financed stadiums or stadia. So, for example, the Baltimore Ravens, they actually got the public to pay 90% of the cost to build a new stadium, and then the team ends up paying no rent, but ultimately keeps all of the revenue from the stadium. Also, the for example, in that example of the Ravens, the city covers ancillary costs. So that's just one example. The Miami Marlins in their deal with the city, they get to, although the city financed the vast majority of the new arena, the Marlins kept pretty much all of the revenues that were created, which begs the question: why would uh, cities, municipalities want to finance these arenas? In the modern period, we also see more creative ways to finance these different stadia, different taxes, different ways of using bonds, different revenue approaches. So we see some of that within within this third phase. So these different points point to the continued growth of sport facilities being financed by governmental entities or us, the public. So, in terms of the overall growth, within the last 20 years, there have been 101 new stadia built that have each of them in some way have received public funding. So it's uh, quite an impressive stat. Facility growth has boomed. We see it in terms of not just new stadia, but ones that have been renovated or remodeled. And just in 2008 alone, uh, over $3.3 billion were spent on new construction. And over the past 2 decades, um, the construction costs alone for professional sports facilities have been in excess of $30 billion over the last 20 years. And over half of those costs are being paid by the public. So think about that. $15 billion have come out of taxes or some sort of public revenue. We have to ask ourselves, well, what could we have done with that money if we didn't use it to subsidize these stadia? The increase in building new sports facilities is very much pronounced, not just in professional sports. As you see on the bottom, there's NFL stadiums that have been recently built, all eclipsing the 1 billion mark. But we also see in college football there being an arms race. And so, in order to be competitive and to attract new recruits, and we touched on this in the sport finance chapter, colleges and universities have had to spend more money to continuously modernize their facilities and offer new amenities to recruits. So this has led to increased costs. Recently, the University of Louisville committed $55 million for 10,000 additional seats, and Baylor itself is actually spending $250 million on a new stadium in Arizona. Has been spending quite a large amount of money for a small amount of seats. So there is certainly a lot going on here. It's not just specific to NCAA football, but also college basketball. We see the recent creation of at the University of Louisville, KFC Yum Center cost $238 million, and that's being financed in an interesting way, which we'll talk about. And then the NBA, the Barclays Center cost, I believe that's the most recent facility to open for the NBA, and that cost over $1 billion. So it's new facilities are opening continuously. In terms of what facilities are out there, we see several types of facilities. The text talks about arenas, stadiums, convention centers, and theaters, to name a few, which are public assembly facilities, and a few other different types of facilities. So we're gonna talk about them briefly. So arenas are just defined as indoor facilities that are intended to accommodate one or multiple tenants that are usually sports teams, and it's intended to uh, also potentially lure potential tenants from outside of the from one city to another. Uh, the way that arenas are financed differ depending on who is the owner. If it's an NCAA facility, it could be financed through private donations or student fees or endowments, or grants. But if it's a facility that is owned by the public or used by a professional team, it could be financed through bonds or some other borrowing its future revenues. Oftentimes, like I said, these are facilities that have multiple tenants. Oftentimes, hockey and basketball share a facility, but that can create issues involving if a arena is not designed to accommodate. Let's say it was originally designed to accommodate basketball and not hockey. That could create some issues with seats not being able to be sold for the other sport because the angles don't work. Stadiums are outdoor or sometimes domed facilities, usually for baseball, football, or outdoor soccer games. And here, facility managers try to maximize the bookings of that facility by attracting other events in addition to their single major tenant. So, for example, the New Orleans Saints, um, they they are home to the New Orleans Saints football team, but they also try to have other bookings like concerts or truck pulls or other things to take up the nights that the Saints are not playing, which is the vast majority of the calendar year. Recently, the Superdome had Beyonce come by on a tour stop, and so that was wildly successful. Um, Stadium managers really have become increasingly more effective in creating events for their venues that take available of or that take advantage of the available space within the arena and then the parking lot. So that could be carnivals or types of conventions. However, conventions traditionally are held in convention centers, and these are built facilities that have been built with the express intent to lure gatherings of professional associations or other types of conventions in business meetings to that facility, to that downtown city area to help generate business for the other businesses in the region or in that area. So restaurants, shops, cabs. Um, this is why oftentimes facilities like convention centers are built not with private money, but they're usually built with public funds because they're owned by some sort of governmental entity. And that means that there's usually going to be or public financing. One very popular facility is the Las Vegas Convention Center, which has several hundred thousand, I believe, square feet of space, and it being in Las Vegas is usually a very popular stop. Uh, the text also references theaters, and these are just smaller venues that are used for presentations of not sports, but usually some sort of artistic entertainment, like a band or like a play. And again, some of these are financed through the government because this can be considered a public good, and this also helps to produce spin-off business like hotels and restaurants and different types of other revenues for a city's businesses. So other venues that the text talks about are universities as well as civic venues, and then finally metropolitan facilities. So university venues look towards serving people who are either attending a university or are alumni and are fans of that school. But these consist traditionally of stadiums and arenas that operate with different economic factors depending on the type of university and the size. This market is really dictated by the student population and who's there at that time. So student populations ebb and flow based on the school year and also on how popular the team is at the time. Local and civic venues are, again, smaller capacity, and they are located in towns or cities throughout the nation. It usually it doesn't matter whether it's a large city or a smaller city, and these are intended to be to provide the public with a facility where a desired event can take place, and it's a convenience thing as well, and these facilities are not often not that big. Um, so metropolitan facilities are larger venues that are located in bigger cities, like Madison Square Garden in New York City or the Staples Center in Los Angeles. And these are, as the slide says, must-play venues based on size and location. So this is oftentimes where we'll see those larger facility management companies like AEG or Global Spectrum come into play and manage those bigger facilities, because they have the skills to actually be able to handle these larger challenges. How does the public use these different types of sport facilities and stadia? Well, the textbook divides it up into sporting events, family events, concerts, trade shows, religious events, and convocations. So when I was working for the Arizona Coyotes, I routinely saw and worked on different event or I guess facility rental agreements where the organization that owned and managed or the organization that managed Jobim.com Arena, now it's believe Gila Bend Arena, but the facility in which the hockey team played in, on off nights, where the arena was not in use, the organization would rent out the facility to outside parties. So it could be a family event like Disney on Ice, or a concert like Katy Perry coming to concert. Usually AEG Live, which is the touring company that would put that show on, would be staging a national or international tour, and they would just take it. They would just take that same tour to the facility. Trade shows, such as the trade shows like gun shows or RV shows. These are multi-day events, oftentimes in convention centers, but they can be in any larger facility. And I also saw, I also worked on religious events where we would have mass worshiping happening in the facility, and this would again happen on usually in the off season. And convocations can occur. These are graduations or speaking events that can take place. So these are different types of events that can take place within any sport facility. So now we know a little bit about these facilities. Let's talk about financing. We talked about this a little bit before, but now that we're a little farther into our studies and we understand a little bit about how financing works, we can talk a bit more knowledgeably. So facilities are not cheap. That's not exactly a shock. As you saw in some of the slides, they can range up to several $billions at this point. And for better or for worse, John Q. Public has chosen to go along with this, and to provide public financing to these facilities, even if the public is not under any obligation to do so, and regardless of whether or not the purported reasons why we should have sports stadiums anyways in a city, usually have been debunked in terms of the financial impact, positive financial impact for that city. But for better or for worse, sport facilities are often receive some sort of financing from the public. So the two facility financing options that we talk about here are private funding and public funding, although you could have a combination of both of them. But private funding is usually where the organization itself secures the investment necessary to build the facility. So we saw this with in what's going to be happening or has happened, depending on when you're watching this video, with the new facility that's being built in Carson, California for the Los Angeles Rams. That's being completely financed through private equity, which could be high net worth people are lending the group that is building the facility money in exchange for an ownership interest, or maybe to be paid back with interest. So you could have stock or a percentage of ownership of the company or of the facility, or it could just be some sort of loan. You could also have sponsorships the sponsorships, so private organizations could be paying in advance their money for the right to associate and affiliate with the team, and then that money can be used to building. And then when the stadium is complete, those sponsorships can be activated without any further substantial money other than the activation costs. Or an organization could promise to pay a certain percentage of the future revenues that will be generated by the facility to help to pay back the people or entities that paid for the corporate and the private financing. We also have public financing, and this is usually where public funds are being used. Um, so this would be a scenario where government funds like taxes are being generated. So income tax increase or a tax on hotels or bonds could be used. So bonds, as we talked about before, are usually money that is being guaranteed by a governmental entity, and it has a low interest rate, and they're sometimes tax exempt. There's also other ways, like I said, and we'll talk about that shortly. But there is the possibility for a combination of public-private financing, and that's usually through a public-private partnership, which we don't really talk too much for the purposes of this lecture here. So for public financing, bonds, like I said, are sort of a promissory note where the borrower is going to pay back the money to the lender during within a specific duration of time with specific interest that will go back to the person who paid the money to the borrower. This is a very common way of financing new stadia. In fact, money to build facilities is usually obtained by issuing bonds. We've got several types of bonds here. There's general obligation bonds, which are used and issued with the full financial backing of the governmental entity in the case that, and in some cases, are backed by property taxes as well. We also have with these are tax exempt, so they're not going to be taxed further in terms of the government taking more money, which makes it more attractive. One example of general obligation bonds is AT&T Stadium that was used to build that stadium. We also have non-guaranteed bond and revenue or / revenue bonds, and these are issued with only the potential financial support of the project. These have no real guarantees and thus are riskier, and therefore they're usually issued at a higher interest rate. Other examples of public financing are, in addition to bonds, you could have something called a tax increment financing approach, which is a TIF. And the TIF is available where an organization that is issuing the TIF will identify a specific geographic area that's usually near or around the stadium that gets that boost from the new facility, and that tax will be only on those businesses that are located close to the facilities. So if you see in this region here, let's say that this building here is the new sports facility, and the TIF is this. Let's say the TIF is this region of the downtown area. Then the TIF would impact these businesses that are within this radius, and they'd have to pay an additional tax to help pay back the construction costs of those TIF bonds. So the KFC Yum Center, which is where the Louisville Cardinals play basketball, it's owned by the Louisville Arena Authority, and they were the ones who issued a TIF district with a 6 square mile radius to help pay for the construction costs. In addition to TIFs, other public funding options could be taxes. So these are hard taxes like property taxes, sales taxes, which are it's just a increase in the amount of the those taxes that go to paying off the cost. But then we've got softer taxes like sin taxes or entertainment taxes, or maybe an additional tax is placed on parking structures to help cover the cost of the public funding of that new facility. In addition to public funding, we've got private funding, like I said. And with private funding, there could be a variety of ways for new stadia to be created, but they usually fall within some sort of investment and are more high risk because governmental entities are not guaranteeing that the loan will be repaid, and private entities, of course, don't have the power to tax. So here we see instances where there's more traditional loans like direct borrowing from a bank or high net worth organizations like hedge funds, and they get their money repaid back at probably a higher interest rate. Uh, with college facilities, this is where we see traditional fundraising, and then with both, most any stadium where they have sponsors, you could sell your sponsorships early to get that money more quickly, or personal seat license, which are sold to people who want to purchase. They're sold to people who want to purchase seats to that new stadium, and they are paying a amount of money just for the right to pay for tickets. So it's a fee that you need to pay before you even get the right to pay for stadium tickets. Um, so why would you actually, um, as a member of the public, want to finance a new stadium? Well, I'm glad you asked. The proponents here of having the public kick in to finance these stadiums say it's going to help with create jobs around the area where the new facilities are going to be built, and it's also going to help with jobs will be created through constructing the stadium, and then building businesses around that new stadium will end up hiring more people because there's going to be a greater demand because new people will be coming into that area. They also say that there will be additional revenues because that facility will be downtown or in wherever it is. There'll be additional revenues, whether it's in taxes or more people will be having dinner down there, so it'll be more money for the businesses. And also, by having this new facility, other mega events might come to your facility above and beyond who plays in that stadium. So the Olympics, or traveling contests like the CrossFit Games or what have you, the Pan American Games, and then the city will increase its status by being known as a world-class city because they've got this facility that houses this team. Or that having a new sports facility is good for us feeling good about ourselves. It makes us a world-class city, and it increases the community's pride in being a citizen of that town. We can all rally around the LA Rams now that they moved back, and then just general overall economic impact. So those are some of the proponents. They say that it helps with kind of a ripple effect that others benefit from. But the opponents say, no, you're crazy. This is already this is just a, a money grab where wealthy owners just want to be able to pawn off the vast majority of construction costs on the public because they know that the public will want to keep this team. They don't want them to leave, and so they'll just talk the public into financing a higher amount of that stadium, and the owners will capture will be the beneficiary of the increased amount of value of the team because they have a new facility. And the experts say, if you remember from that article we read, that the revenues that are generated for the city are often overestimated. And since we're dealing with finite resources, if the public invests $2 billion in a new sports stadium downtown, then that means that's $2 billion less to pay for roads or pay for hospitals, et cetera. So it is a finite sort of uh, amount of money. It's a zero sum game. Um, and then kind of piggybacking off of that finite pot of money means that there'll be less money for schools and hospitals and other public welfare services. And it's just not something that the community should put as a priority. So I'm curious to get to have this conversation about what you guys think as well on this. So just kind of with the last few slides, I want to show you one, what does it look like when you're actually breaking down where the money comes from for a new facility. So as you can see, some of the money certainly comes from the organization itself. This one with Lucas Oil Stadium and the Colts. So $50 million comes from the team, but then the county is offering uh, over almost $275 million. There's a tax on hotels that are going to be kicking in, additional $134 million. We've got a rental car tax. We've got sports development tax, a sporting event tax, restaurant tax. All these different taxes are generating the vast majority of the revenue. And then there's vanity license plates, which is kind of a de minimis amount here. But you can see that the vast majority is from taxing the public. So let's say that the facility has been constructed. Well, how does the facility generate its money? We've talked about this a little bit briefly, but we can just circle back to this a little bit. Ticket sales, also known as gate receipts, is the lifeblood of most facilities. So ticket sales are generally the baseline driver of revenue. We also have things like sponsorships, naming rights, rent from tenants, or touring acts that don't have an ownership interest in the property, so they're paying money. But sometimes, as I said, the main tenant of a facility has a sweetheart lease agreement where they might just pay $1 in rent a month or a year to the owner in exchange for having being that tenant. So that's rent is not always a sure thing. And then we've got ancillary revenues at some venues like merchandising and food and beverage and parking, depending on what the agreement is with the facility owner, oftentimes a governmental entity, and the tenant, usually a private organization. When I worked with the Coyotes, the city took in very little money. The vast majority of the money from parking and food and beverage and merch and other events that are being held at that arena were the vast majority were going to the team and not to the government to pay the loan back for the construction of that arena. So the textbook also talks about career opportunities, and it's true. There are a diversity of opportunities available for those who want to work in facilities. There's usually an arena general manager, so they sort of are the CEO of the arena, and they report to C-level, executive level individuals who are in charge of sort of the long-term planning of the organization. And that general manager wears many hats, meets with all these different people from marketing, people from public relations, bookings, operations, facilities, the box office. So that's one person. The arena marketing director works with the general manager and other high-level employees in conjunction with helping to promote and market whoever the tenants are or who's coming to town, who's leasing out the facility. Public Relations and Communications Director also works with liaisoning between the media and the local public and the other employees within the facility. Booking Director oftentimes just exclusively deals with getting acts to come to the arena so that when the main tenant is not using it, that those dates can be filled. Very important. When I was with the Coyotes, we actually had a resident booking director from one of, I believe it was AEG, and that was just to book tours of music acts that will come to the facility. So we had a steady flow of music acts coming in. Operations director, that's the person that once the lease has been signed, that they would work to help accommodate whatever was necessary for that tenant, that rental agreement to be realized. So if it was a band, they'd help. If and it was a hockey arena, they would change it over from a hockey arena. The operations director and his or her crew would change the facility from hockey to make it possible to have concerts, and then back again once that event had concluded. And then the box office director is the person who oversees the ticket sales on a day-to-day basis within the box office, and other ticketing agents answer that individual. A few issues within facility management as we wrap up here are issues of security. Of course, we live in a post 9/11 world, and so ensuring the safety and comfort of all spectators is paramount. We also see this as an issue as more and more mega events are being planned and facilities are getting larger. So things involving bag checks and pat downs and other normal technological measures to help with security, whether it's metal detectors or the like, are becoming a regular day to day within security. Oftentimes, facilities coordinate jointly with local law enforcement or even federal law enforcement if it's a larger issue and it's a larger event. Um, an important aspect of security and making sure people are safe are creating crowd control and crowd management plans, which is based off of categorizing the type of event and knowing what facilities and the environment are within surround that facility, having awareness, understanding about potential threats of violence, and in diffusing situations that might become confrontational. So for example, if a facility is hosting a game between two rivals, it's incumbent upon the facility to understand the potential for violence based off of the nature of the fan bases. And a good crowd management plan would make sure that people are strategically placed to diffuse situations in that regard and to have proper screening so that certain weapons don't make it into the facility at all. Another new topic that's been trending within facilities is this sustainability initiative, which is basically making sure the facility is environmentally friendly. Because public facilities consume a great deal of energy, really more energy per square foot than any other in the retail industry. The response has been that facility management industry has tried to go green and create green management teams and to try to reduce and cut waste and any sort of reduce energy usage and pollution. And we see this both with facilities and then professional sports teams of having green initiatives and working with different stakeholders to have alternatives to just throwing things away and to have recycling and to be conscious with water usage, which is a good thing. And in addition to helping to save the environment, two other bonuses are provided to an organization, whether it's the organization or the facility. It helps to reduce operating expenses by lowering the costs of these different requirements like power or water, but it also helps to build your brand as being a good steward of the environment and helping to, uh, to help make your city a cleaner and better place. Uh, For quite some time, the Americans with Disabilities Act has also been something that's been important for facilities. And the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed by George H.W. Bush in 1990 to prevent discrimination against individuals with qualified disabilities. Uh, and that falls within not just in their employment, but also giving public services and providing public accommodations. So here, new facilities must be accessible to people with disabilities, and that includes includes the concession areas, any areas that are public walkways, restrooms, parking areas, drop-up and pickups, entranceways, anything relating to public safety, such as visual alarms and also signage. So the question for sports managers is whether or not your facility is accessible to everyone with a qualified disability. And the ADA was actually updated with a number of changes that directly impact stadiums and arenas. So I would recommend, if you end up working in the stadium, to make sure that you're up to date with these changes. As we move further and further into the future and more bells and whistles and the cost increases with facilities, we're also seeing an emphasis being placed on functionality. Uh, and that has manifested itself in cutting edge facilities that are mixed use, where it's not just the sports facility, but it's also a living, breathing part of the downtown cityscape. So an issue for sport managers and managers comes up is the facility too gaudy? Is it cost too much money? When is the public going to say enough is enough? We're not going to support this. And again, having a facility with some intrinsic benefit and functionality where it can be reused in different ways, not just hosting a game 8 times a year, that's going to help with making sure that the facility is not unreasonably expensive. And that also kind of takes us to entertainment value, making sure that the facility is not just for 8 games a year, but it has other elements that provide utilities such as restaurants, shopping, civic aspects, and we see Marlins Park having that somewhat, and Tropicana Field also having that. And so that's really it for the purposes of facilities. So I hope you enjoyed the lecture, and I look forward to talking about this with you guys offline. Thank